Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to another pattern test here. And today I've got something really interesting to pattern out here. And I honestly don't know quite what to expect out of these. So we're just going to have to shoot them and find out. Now those loads are some of these. And by now you've probably read the title and realized that this box isn't exactly what we're patterning. But as you can see, there's a piece of tape on here labeled BB. That is my grandfather's writing on that piece of tape, and these guys are the shells that are inside of it here. Now yes, the shell does say number 2, but it's not a 2, it is a BB shell. But these were hand loaded in the mid to late 80s by my grandfather as his goose load. These are 1 7/8 ounce of lead BB. So these were loaded before the lead ban in 1991, I believe was the year everything went away. So these were sometime in the mid to late 80s hand loaded by him for when he went out goose hunting. Now that was a little bit before my time, but from what I understand, he took a lot of geese with those loads, along with other things like raccoons was another big thing that he went out and hunted with those loads. But I'm sure he took everything you could imagine, like groundhogs or rabbits or squirrels or whatever the case was. Even though it is a BB shell, knowing him, if he was on a hunt with those and something moved, he probably took a shot at it. So with that being said, yes, those are outlawed. We cannot use those shells for goose anymore, unfortunately. But I've still got a bunch of them left, and what I've been using them for is kind of pest control around the farm here. I've shot a number of groundhogs with them, raccoons, a fox, that kind of stuff, and they do the job pretty well, at least out to 30 yards is what I've shot them to before. Not actually on a patterning board though, just at groundhogs and stuff like that, and they've done the job. So I'm really curious to see what these will do on a patterning board. But I cut one of the shells open a good long while ago, and I still have the wad and the shot from the shell. So let's take a quick look at that for those of you that might be interested, because I think it's something kind of interesting to show, especially since it is a hand load from 35 plus years ago now. Alright, so first up here, yes, it does say it's a number 2. But that's just the hull. It's not what's actually in the shell. But these were hand loaded, star crimped. As you can see, it's not perfect. It's got some kind of a primer in there. I don't exactly know what brand it would be or anything like that. But this is a 3-inch 1 7/8 ounce load of BBs that he hand loaded. As for the wad that he was using back then, it's like a Target style wad, to be honest with you. It's stamped on the bottom here, WWAA, so maybe a Winchester AA wad, which would make sense from the era. Nothing really too special about it, just more of a typical Target style wad. And these are some of those lead BBs. Now they actually are relatively close to like a 177 BB gun pellet, but they're noticeably bigger than a lot of the other stuff that we've tested so far. For sure, you can actually feel the heft of these in your hands, even if it's only 1 or 2 pellets. But as you can see, they're definitely lead BBs. Nothing too special to see, but just something really interesting and from a much different time than now anyway. And as for what setup we're going to be running them out of, I do have his original old single shot 12 gauge with a fixed modified choke, but it's got some issues and we will see it probably one day on the channel. But as for now, I've got my 1187 Premier with the stock modified choke in the gun. It's a 707 constriction for anyone that might be interested in that information. So if you're new to this series, what we're going to do first is we're going to go over to my chronograph and shoot 3 rounds across the chronograph and get our average velocity. I really have no idea what to expect out of these loads, to be honest with you. They could be really consistent. They could be really all over the board. I don't know. But I can tell you just by the way they feel like they're loaded pretty hot. They definitely have a noticeable amount of recoil to them over a lot of the other stuff that I've shot. From a 12 gauge anyway, that is. But after we get our average across the chronograph, we're going to go over and shoot a 20 yard, a 30 yard, and a 40 yard pattern. I'm going to go mark all of our hits, draw our circles, and then bring you guys in so that way we can see how these did. So let's go over to the chronograph real quick first and shoot our 3 rounds and get our average speed. Alright, we're set up at the chronograph, so let's take our 3 shots here and get our average velocity. They seem to be relatively consistent for how old they are, but they're definitely loaded a little bit on the hotter side, because I guess they would be somewhere in the 1100 feet per second range, but We're up in the mid to high 1200s here a lot of the time, but definitely some interesting information that I've never tested out of these shells so far. All right, so that's definitely some really interesting information out of those shells. So let's go over here and shoot them at 20, 30, and 40 and see what they can do. I would show you the footage, but there's really not much to see. So I'm just gonna shoot them, mark all of our targets, and then I'll bring you guys back and we'll take a look at what we got. All right, so after shooting our 20, 30, and 40, this is what our 20-yard pattern looks like. That center circle is a 10-inch circle, and the outer circle is a 20-inch circle because it is only 20 yards. And if I put a 30-inch, everything would be inside that 30-inch circle. But as you can see, in our 10-inch circle there's 37 pellets in that core. And if you back up, there's 50 pellets within that 20-inch circle at 20 yards. As far as what's outside of the pattern here, there's just a couple strung around the edges here. But overall, it looks like a relatively even or consistent pattern for what it is anyway. A 35 to 40 year old hand-loaded lead load of BBs. All in all, I don't think that's a terrible start at all for 20 yards. Okay, as we move over to 30 yards here, I think the core of our pattern was just a little bit high on the paper here. So we do have our 30-inch going off the edge just a little bit. But that's the same 10-inch circle here in the core. It's got 35 pellets inside of it. And as we back up to our 30-inch circle now, there's 54 pellets within our 30-inch circle. And as far as outside, we have a total of 4. There's 3 down here and 1 right over here. But all in all, there's not a goose that's going to make it through that at all, whether it be 35 years ago or today. Although, unfortunately, we can't use lead for waterfowl anymore today. But with it being lead BBs, we definitely start to see it open up. There's some larger gaps in here that if you were shooting something smaller, that they might be able to squeeze through. But as for Geese, which is what he loaded these loads for, there's not a goose that's going to make it through that pattern whatsoever. All right, now we move out to 40 yards, and as you can see, I drew our circles a little bit lower because I do think the core started to drop just a little bit out at this longer range. So we do have a little bit lower shot on the paper. But I still think we can see what we want to see here. So in our 10-inch circle here, there's 18 pellets. And in our 30-inch circle, there's 33 pellets. So we definitely started to open up here for sure. There's no question about that. Which is absolutely to be expected with these loads. And with a BB load in general. You just don't have the pellet count like you would in a smaller shot size load. But still, if you lead your shots properly and center that pattern up properly, I don't think there's very many geese that are going to make it through this core area here. Now, yes, as you start to get to the outside, you do start to come into contact with some of these voids, mainly this one right here. But overall, I'm not terribly displeased with that, for what it is anyway. A 35 to 40 year old hand-loaded lead load of BBs in, I guarantee you, a not very ideal hand loading setup. All right, well, how do y'all think my grandfather did hand loading these all those years ago? I know he killed a lot of geese with these loads, and I'm sure everything else from squirrels to raccoons, groundhogs, whatever else he could get within range of probably was taken with these loads, if I had to take a guess. But what do y'all think? For being 35 to 40 year old hand loads here, mid 80s, I don't think they did really all that bad for what they are. They're a lead BB shell that was hand loaded a long time ago. The materials available were not nearly as good as what they are today, so I don't think he did all that bad. Now, unfortunately, we can't test these on geese because they outlawed lead shot, but for the past several years, these have been my farm kind of pest control, mainly groundhog control, and they will probably continue to be if I'm using a shotgun. But either way, I'm pretty happy with how they perform. There's nothing super spectacular about them, but they definitely seem to be pretty solid options for what he had available to him at the time. And with that being said, I do have a couple other loads of his that he hand loaded up all those years ago as well. One of them's a duck load and one of them's a turkey load. So if those are something you guys want to see, leave a comment and let me know, and I'll bring them out here and I'll test them to see what a duck load of his and what a turkey load of his did all those years ago. So with that being said, I've got a couple more tests I'd like to film out here this morning while it's really not windy at all or anything like that. Nice cool overcast. So I'm going to get back to it. Stay tuned because we've got plenty more interesting tests coming to the channel. Thank you all for liking and subscribing and all that stuff. And I'll see y'all in the next one.